Liz Cheney recently released a video that some suggest questions the patriotism of Justice Department lawyers who have worked on behalf of detained terrorism suspects. Take a listen.
The pendulum is starting to swing. An America run by progressives is really, it's about to happen. We're going to be looking for people who share our values.
So who did President Obama's Attorney General Eric Holder hire? 9 lawyers who represented or advocated for terrorist detainees. Who are these government officials? Eric Holder will only name 2. Why the secrecy behind the other 7? Whose values do they share? Tell Eric Holder, Americans have a right to know the identity of the Al-Qaeda 7.
Well, a number of prominent former Republican officials condemned the ad in a joint letter, and one of the signers of that letter is David Rivkin. He's currently a partner at the Baker and Hostetler law firm, as well as former deputy director of the Office of Policy Development, Department of Justice in the Reagan and George H.W. Bush administrations. Good to have you here.
Good to be with you.
I want to make sure that I have this right, because conservatives disagree with some of the things that are in this ad, but they don't necessarily see this as a big fight as it has been portrayed by the New York Times.
Of course not. We have a principled disagreement about an important issue really relating to legal ethics. Nothing more than that. And of course, New York Times and various other sources are trying to blow up into a major debate, which this is not.
So, well, what are your concerns, though, however, about that particular ad?
The biggest concern, and it's not a question of disgorging information about who's working at the Justice Department, is the presumption that underlies this ad, that you can make meaningful assumptions, deductions about the sympathy and sort of proclivity of individual lawyers based upon people or causes they're represented. And that is not true in our legal system. It's a matter of fundamental principle.
Well, what's wrong with a group saying, I'd like to know who these people are? I mean, as they say, the best disinfectant is sunshine, and the more information we have, the better judgments we can make in our government.
There are 2 answers. The more pedantic one, and there are actually privacy reasons and various statutes that do not allow somebody to come in and ask who is working and what. But let's leave it aside. Let's say Congress can ask for this information. What I personally don't like, again, is the assumption that you can say so-and-so represented this particular group, let's say pro bono, and therefore I'm going to infer the sympathy for the cause. There are many reasons lawyers can represent people, very unpopular people, reasons of principle. And by the way, I don't like the positions they've taken. I deplore them. But I certainly would not want to jump to the conclusion that somebody, let's say, who represented a given Al-Qaeda detainee is pro-Al-Qaeda, sympathetic to Al-Qaeda. Something
that you point out here is that the profession of being a lawyer is a little different than it is in other adversarial arenas. Because, I mean, you know, lawyers may fight each other on points of the law, but that doesn't mean that they may disagree, but they're not necessarily disagreeable.
Very other important thing. It's very difficult for a lawyer, if he's subjected to that kind of inquiry, to disassociate himself, quote unquote, from a former client because of a duty to maintain client loyalty and duty to maintain confidentiality. So it's not easy for me if somebody said, Mr. Rivkin, you represented such and such entity. How do you feel about it? For me, unlike you, for example, to say, I personally think I representing him, I get him off in technicality, but usually a bad guy, is inconsistent with the ethical canons of the profession.
Got to go. Thank you so much for joining us.